I've been studying a lot of wrestling to improve my skills from the front headlock, and I'm excited to share my findings with you by first discussing something you and I are more familiar with: the back. The back and the front headlock have a lot of similarities. When controlling the back, generally we have our strangle arm over the shoulder, and our control arm goes under the armpit. And if our strangle arm is closest to the mat, the primary form of escape for our opponent is by getting their back to the mat. But if we switch sides and now our control arm is closest to the mat, now the primary form of escape for our opponent is going to be turning towards their knees. And if we understand the vulnerabilities of this position, we can start to be more effective as the attacker. Now, from the front headlock, we have very similar gripping options, and the standard form of control tends to involve one strangle arm over the shoulder and one control arm in the armpit. And before we can start getting into cool attacks, we need to understand the vulnerabilities of our control. The weakness of our strangle arm is our opponent can grab our elbow, and a lot of the escapes to this side are going to be reliant on that elbow control, whether it be an arm drag or what's known as a short drag or a sucker drag, or it could be the Gary Tonin special of the Udageshi, or it can be a fireman's carry, but the key aspect is they control the elbow of our strangle arm. But on the side of our control arm, they don't have that same luxury, and they do not have the ability to grab our elbow. So on this side, their primary form of escape is going to be a peek out. So as the attacker, if we switch from a standard form of control to one where we have two control arms, we better be ready for our opponent to use a peek out. So generally, our opponent's going to be looking to do a short drag in one direction or a peek out in the other. And whichever direction they're going to go, generally they're going to have that same side leg up and their opposite hand on the mat, which gives them diagonal base. It'd be the same thing when building height from turtle. If the bottom player wants to have the most structure, they'd put one hand on the mat and the opposite foot on the mat. So if we're attacking from the front headlock, our opponent may have the foot up on the side of our strangle arm and their opposite hand on the mat. And if they're in this posture, we know they're going to be looking to control our elbow. And they may initially control our elbow with that same side arm, which they can use to set up an Udageshi. But if they wanted to go into a short drag, they would need to transfer control to their other arm to facilitate their escape. And once we understand this as the attacker, we can start to propose solutions to deal with this resistance. And when trying to deal with arm drags, head position is a very important variable.
Because if he's looking to get behind me, he wants to get his head behind me, right? So ways I can look to prevent this is by bringing my head in front of his shoulder. So now when he looks to accomplish the same thing, it's going to be much more difficult.
So here we see the defender is in the perfect posture to start setting up his short drag. And as they go into their escape, the top player is tucking his head inside the armpit, which completely breaks down the defender's posture. The defender started with a posture where their left foot was on the mat, but the head tuck forced them into a posture where now their left knee is on the mat. And it also makes it very difficult for them to come across and control our elbow with their right arm. And from what I've observed, if our head stays on our opponent's back, it's going to be much harder for us to prevent this escape. But if we're able to tuck our head in the armpit, now it's going to be much more difficult for them to complete this escape, and we can start to go into our attacks. Now, the other aspect of this is when the defender wants to go into this drag, they want to sink their weight back.
Probably the most common thing is people don't sag their weight back. And then watch this, I sag back, sag.
Initially, this hand is being used for base, but as they sag their weight back, it allows them to take this hand off the mat, control our elbow, and go into their drag escape. But if we're able to get our head behind the armpit, it makes it hard for them to take weight off of their hands. And you can see this hand is being forced to base. And as the attacker is working around towards the back, he's constantly driving weight onto his opponent's hands. So after studying a lot of footage, it seems to me like wrestlers prefer to be in a defensive posture where the foot on the side of the strangle arm is up. And as the attacker, if our head is on our opponent's back, it's going to allow them to sink their weight back and go into their drag escape. So if we're attacking from the front headlock and our opponent's in this posture, the best proposed solution that I've seen work is tucking our head in the armpit, which makes it hard for them to sink their weight back and breaks down the posture needed for them to complete this escape. So although I'm very new to studying wrestling, this seems to be a very reliable way to attack from the front headlock when our opponent has their foot up on the side of our strangle arm. Now for those of you that have been subscribed for a while, you'll notice this video has much more wrestling footage than you're used to. And that's because we now have the ability to enter other martial arts into the Outlier database, which includes wrestling. It gave me a great ability to compare the different ways Jiu Jitsu athletes and wrestlers play from the front headlock. And from what I've noticed, Jiu Jitsu athletes tend to adopt the opposite posture. Instead of putting their foot up on the side of the strangle arm, Jiu Jitsu athletes tend to put their foot up on the side of the control arm. So the question becomes, why do these postures tend to differ? And as a starting point, let's try to understand why a wrestler would adopt a Jiu Jitsu posture and put their foot up on the side of the control arm. You can see the wrestler initially has his foot up on the side of the strangle arm, but as the attacker threatens to go behind, the defensive player switches his legs and puts his foot up on the side of the control arm, because putting your foot up on this side makes it more difficult for the attacker to go behind.
From this position, we're going to step our right leg up. Okay, so now my partner goes to circle behind me. It's a much more difficult thing because I physically have a wedge over my partner's hip.
Something to consider here is that in wrestling, you can be a bit more cavalier with your arm position, and you can bring your arm to the outside of your opponent's hip to defend the go behind. But in Jiu Jitsu, as soon as that arm comes to the outside, that's the green light to go in for a guillotine. And with no guillotines in wrestling, it makes sense that they'll be able to stay on their knees and primarily use their arms to defend the go behind. But again, if you elect to stay on your knees and throw your arm to the outside to prevent the go behind, you're leaving the door open for a guillotine. So in Jiu Jitsu, maybe we start with our foot up on the same side as the strangle arm, but as our opponent threatens a go behind, our arms are occupied in defending the strangle, so we have to switch our posture and put our leg up on the other side to primarily use our leg position to prevent the go behind. So I think in Jiu Jitsu we tend to have a posture like this because we have to use our legs to defend the go behind, whereas in wrestling you can put your foot up on the side of the strangle arm because you can use your arms much more aggressively to defend the go behind. Another thing to consider is that Jiu Jitsu guys like to escape the front headlock by pulling guard. And by having a posture where our foot is up on the side of the control arm, it allows us to more easily sit to guard. So as the attacker in a Jiu Jitsu setting, we're going to need a solution for when our opponent puts their leg up on the side of our control arm and uses it to sit on their far hip to recover their guard. So let's say we're attacking from the front headlock and we start to go behind, but we see our opponent is already starting to fall towards their far hip. So we reset knowing this is the reaction our opponent wants to give us. And we can play a speed-based game where we race around to the back with the goal of getting our opponent between our knees before their hip hits the mat. Now this speed-based technique does work, but it can be a little unreliable. Here we can see my man was not even close to winning the race. So one way I've seen people slow this race down a bit is by grabbing the far ankle. What the defender would like to do is slide this far leg in to escape to their guard. But by grabbing the far ankle, it makes it hard for them to do this, which allows us to work around towards the back and put the bottom player between our knees. Now this seems to work great if our opponent's down on both knees and we can reach the far ankle. But if they put their foot up on the side of our control arm, their far ankle is likely going to be out of reach. So instead, we can look to move into a cradle. And ideally, we can use that cradle to put our opponent down on a hip. And once we get them down on a hip, our submissions become a lot more effective. This was the primary theme of my previous YouTube video here. And more specifically, the theme is if you lose the battle and your opponent's able to fall to their far hip, how do you proceed? Is it better to step over towards mount? Or instead, should we go the opposite direction and throw ourselves into the inverted front headlock position? Now for that answer, I'm going to refer you to the previous video, but now I want to sum this one up. When controlling from the front headlock, we're likely going to have a strangle arm and a control arm. The primary escape on the side of our control arm is going to be a peek out, and the primary escape on our strangle arm is going to be a fireman's carry type movement or a short drag. And by assessing our opponent's posture, we can get a good idea of the techniques they're going to use to escape. If their foot is up on the side of our strangle arm, they're likely going to be escaping to that side. So our focus goes to head position, as we tuck our head into their armpit to deny their arm drag and facilitate our attacks. But what seems to be more common in Jiu Jitsu is having the foot up on the side of the control arm. And as the attacker, we should be ready for them to try and sit to their far hip to pull guard. To deal with this resistance, we can look to grab the far ankle as we work around towards the back. Or we can look to take a cradle and put our opponent down on a hip. But if we lose the race and our opponent gets their hip to the mat, this is where things start to get very interesting. And I give my opinion on the best way to proceed in this video here. And if you're interested in the website that I made to help myself and other nerds study Jiu Jitsu, the link is right here.